Power Hour with John Lee.
We got some letters sent to various people in positions of authority and power in the United States. The only problem with the letters was that they were caked in anthrax. This was the anthrax letters scandal situation, call it what you want. It was people receiving letters with anthrax in them. And, you know, I think 5 people died. A lot of people were seriously injured. This is a chemical weapon. It's a biochemical weapon. It's a biological weapon, anthrax. Naturally occurring as a biological weapon. And that's a very serious thing. That's murder, you know. And the problem with it was that it was highly sophisticated. This anthrax, you don't just make it in your kitchen. It was military grade, and not just military grade. It was beyond that. And they said that it was a guy called Bruce Ivins, or Ivins, I've heard it pronounced both ways. And he was just this one guy. It's always one guy, you know, one guy who was upset for some stupid reason and decided to make military grade anthrax. He was a biochemist, and he did work at Fort Detrick. But they said, well, he was pissed off for his own reasons, and he made this anthrax, and he put it in these letters, and he sent it to these people, and then he committed suicide. So once again, it was one guy, but you can't ask him about it because he's dead. I mean, come on. And he's not the only one just connected with this who's dead in absolutely ridiculous circumstances. And the problem is that to make that kind of anthrax, you need a team of the most, you know, expert people in the world, you know, and you need incredible machinery. You have to refine those anthrax spores. And there are only 3 or 4 places in the world that can be done, and Fort Detrick is not one of them. So it was impossible for Bruce Ivins to have done that. It's literally not scientifically possible with the equipment that he had on his own. No way. And that's not me saying that. That's the top experts in the world saying not possible. There are other places that could possibly do it, like Porton Down in England, but not Fort Detrick. No way. So who actually did it, and why is Bruce Ivins dead? Good questions. Well, there are other deaths to consider, but this was part. When people started looking into this and saying, right, who can actually make this kind of anthrax? And they're looking at other places in America, and they're looking at places in Canada, they're looking at Porton Down in England, and they started to realise that there was an international black market for biochemical weapons that went everywhere around the world. And you know, I mean, the Americans acknowledged selling biochemical weapons to Saddam Hussein that he then used to kill the Kurds in his own country. You know, so this biochemical weapon industry is a massive, massive underground black market that goes all around the world, including South Africa. So during the apartheid regime, right, the white government really wanted to annihilate the black people of the country. There's just no other way of looking at it. And they came upon the idea of biochemical weapons. And this was part of something called Project Coast. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to attack the black women in South Africa with a chemical weapon or a biological weapon that would make them infertile and unable to have children. How evil is that? It would sterilize the black women without them even knowing it. You know, and then they're trying to have families and they can't because they've been sterilized by the government. And the South Africans didn't have the technology to do that, but they were part of the international biochemicals black market, which included the United States and included the United Kingdom. And everybody was up to the nuts in this. Especially United Kingdom and especially Porton Down. And who was the top boss at Porton Down? Dr. David Kelly. Dr. David Kelly is famous because he was a weapons inspector in Iraq during the whole weapons of mass destruction bullshitterama where Saddam Hussein could launch nuclear strikes against anybody in the world in less than 40 minutes. And it was Dr. David Kelly, who was the chief weapons inspector in Iraq, who went to a journalist and said, "This is lies. This is absolute lies. I'm in there all the time." You need massive installations for that. It's not something you can hide under a table. You need enormous factories and plants and to produce nuclear weapons or even nuclear power, much less weaponize that nuclear power. So Dr. David Kelly became famous for that because he was identified as the source of that story when the big scandal came out that Tony Blair was lying and presenting lies to the people and lies to the parliament in order to justify joining the Americans in an attack on Iraq. And that was a bad enough scandal in itself. And that's what made him famous. But he was also the chief of biochemistry, defence weaponry at Porton Down. Top boy, and right involved in the biochemistry industry. And this is a man who certainly knew too much. And then after this scandal, he decided to walk out into a field, take a load of tablets, even though he had an aversion to tablets. He couldn't swallow them. Everybody knew this. And then he decided to start slashing his own wrists. But I suppose they didn't know that he had a problem with his elbow and couldn't really do that kind of thing. He had very limited mobility in his arm. And he wouldn't die from those cuts anyway. And this is testified to by experts. That won't kill you. You'll bleed for half an hour, but it won't kill you. No way. And he was found by joggers. I think they were just walking, actually. But they were out in a field with the dog, maybe. And they found him, a couple, they found him against a tree. Right? He's got his shoulders and his head against the tree, and he looks dead. So they've called the authorities. And then it later transpires in the official report, they've got him lying down on the floor, not even touching the tree, and said, "This is how we found him." And so, of course, this couple went to the media and said, "That's not true. He wasn't like that. Somebody's moved him." And they've just been studiously ignored. So, I mean, there are plenty of groups of experts, of doctors, who are campaigning for a real investigation into Dr. David Kelly's death. So there you've got two biochemists who were heavily involved in the biochemical black market, who were both clearly killed. I mean, Bruce Evans, did he commit suicide? I doubt it, because he was the guy that they decided to blame for these attacks. And David Kelly, did he kill himself? I very much doubt it. This was a weapons inspector used to going into Iraq. If anyone can handle the pressure of anything, it's Dr. David Kelly. And it's all connected back to Dr. Frank Olson. Who was he? He was a biochemist in the 1950s working with the same people doing the same things. And there is a full series of documentaries about this on Netflix, right? We're even in Netflix territory. And the official story is that Dr. Frank Olson, who was involved in all the same kinds of things, he was given LSD by somebody in the CIA, and then 9 days later, he just randomly ran and dived through a window and fell to his death. 9 days after getting given in his drink, they put LSD in his drink. 9 days later, he gets up and runs and dives through the window face first and falls to his death. And his son at the time said, "This is absolute bullshit. They've clearly thrown him out the window because he wants to leave. He doesn't want to play the game anymore. So they've murdered him. They've chucked him out the window, obviously." And even the autopsy concluded that he'd been smashed in the head before he went through the window. And this is all documented on Netflix, right? It's documented.